This episode is powered by Specialized Recruiting Group in Livonia, helping businesses find top-tier talent and professionals land their next big opportunity.
Welcome to Ghosted by the Machine, the podcast where job seekers break through the algorithm and finally get heard. No filters, no bots, just real conversations about what's actually happening in today's hiring system. I'm your host, Mark Lane, and today we're talking about leadership and how it shows up in hiring. Kate Johnson is the host of the Well-Led podcast, where she digs into what it really takes to lead people while delivering results. Kate, we really appreciate you being here. Welcome to Ghosted by the Machine.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's my pleasure.
So, Kate, on your podcast, you talk a lot about the tension between getting results and leading people well. On this show, we hear all the time from job seekers about how hiring has started to feel really impersonal, even automated. Where do those two conversations meet for you?
I think they meet in the same place where I see most leadership issues meeting. That what is the fulcrum between the necessary result, what the work requires of us, and then the fact that we are not machines. We are, in fact, people. We are flawed. We take things personally. We excel. We fail. All of those things. There is this space between those two tensions, as you've kind of already called that out, where we need to be professional, but we are imperfect. And I think in the context of talking about what the job market looks right now, I actually think we've erred too much on the side of quote unquote professionalism and have not accounted for imperfection in a way that's going to let people feel seen and supported and cared for, even in times where they're being told no. So I do think it's ultimately a leadership problem at the end of the day.
And I've talked to other professionals about leadership, and they say the same thing. And a lot of it is, we still have, we got the AI component, but someone still has to make those decisions on how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the fail point, right? Is that instead of using AI or any of the technologies available to us as tools to support human decision making, what's happened in talent acquisition, recruitment in that space is that the tool has been made into the thing, where instead of it being, I use AI to automate and speed up the process of elimination that has to happen with job applicants, it's now become, no, it does all of the stuff for me. And then I'm left with results that may or may not meet the need and not serving the people that are trying to engage in the process.
Well, you work with organizations building leadership and leadership pipelines and developing future leaders. When the hiring process breaks down or candidates feel ignored, what does that usually reveal about leadership and culture inside the organization?
Well, I'm going to do the classic organizational development consultant answer and say it depends, because it can be hard from the outside, looking in to really understand. It tells you, if nothing else, that there is, I'll call it a breakdown in communication between the hiring manager and the people tasked with supporting the hiring process. I think it might be helpful for us to say, like, let's be very specific about this. Is it somebody who applies and 2 years later maybe gets an automated note saying, thanks for your application, we've decided to move on? Is it someone who has gone through an initial screening and then never heard from the recruiter again? Or are we dealing with someone who's been put through the ringer of 5 or 6 different interviews, doing test assignments, and then hears nothing for ages until finally being told they don't have the job? There are so many ways that it can break down. And at each of those points, I think we can evaluate, where did leadership drop the ball and where did communication fail between a hiring manager and somebody in talent acquisition. So I guess the question I would have for you at this point is where do we want to have that discussion of where leadership and culture, where are we looking at, one level or the other? because I think it's going to be a little bit different at each point.
Sure. I think the biggest thing is when it comes to who handles the job description, who handles going through that information, that parses through that information that they received for the jobs. How do they make their decisions? Is leadership saying these are how many individuals we're looking to not just hire but review? So we post this job, and they get 500 applicants, which from what I understand is pretty common these days. And then
Yeah.
they say, well, give me the top 10. And what happens to the other 490? And I can give you a prime example. My daughter graduated college last year. She applied for numerous jobs. A year later, this is like a few weeks ago. Hey, Dad, just to let you know, I got a phone call from this job that I applied for a year later, thanking me for applying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually feel like those are people doing the better job than most other companies. The fact that
At least they got
any
back.
contact made with the applicant. So I think there are a couple of points where we kind of corporately, we haven't fully educated people entering the workforce about what this looks like. And then on the inside, if you will, we fail when it comes to preparing leaders. We just do. I think the last research I saw showed that like 40 or 47% of managers state that they haven't received any prior training or that they don't feel prepared going into the work. Yes, it's less than 50%, but it's still highly problematic. The gap between preparation and performance when it comes to that first level manager, I think is at the root of most of the workplace problems we have today. Because if you don't start with a level surface area, anything you build will then be a problem. And that's what we see as people move up through the ranks, and those not prepared frontline managers become directors, become executives. They are still not prepared. They've just built more bad stuff on top of a weak foundation.
Right.
And it's hard to blame them when learning and development is constantly being cut for short-term benefit. But that's a whole process. So I can
You're
talk a
going down
long
that rabbit hole.
Yes. Let's pull me back. Let's pull me back. So let's talk about educating job seekers that there are some, at least in the States, there are some considerations. Applying for a job and being a viable candidate for a job are two different things. I can apply for absolutely anything that I want to. I am not a candidate for every job I apply for. Hey, I come from healthcare, so that clinical licensed position is sort of the example that I have built into me after 20. I can apply for a nursing job, but I'm never going to be a candidate for a nursing job because I'm not a registered nurse. I don't have the license. So is my expectation being managed through that? Do I really understand that there are qualifications for certain jobs that are go, no go? There is a gate, that keeps me on one side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I understand that, am I managing my own expectations and possibly my own frustration? Yes, I've applied to 100 jobs this week, but maybe I'm actually only a candidate for 2 of them.
Right. You're rolling the dice.
And I've just kind of done a scatter shot. So we don't have good ways of really helping job seekers understand how to engage in the market and what some of the entry points are for them. I don't know what that would look like. It's maybe kind of the instead of home ec, we have this as something that we do in junior high
Yeah, job ed.
to help prepare people. And maybe home ec too,
Yeah,
because
it could
it's
be.
good
Yeah.
if people can cook for themselves. But it should be all of this, like, here are the adult skills that you need. And one of those is going out and joining the workforce.
I think my daughter and my son both in high school had to learn how to write a resume.
Yeah. And but even that isn't necessarily here's what it's going to look like to engage in the process.
Right.
Right. And resumes are, so yesterday at this point. Is it Elon Musk has just said he's gotten rid of resumes for applications entirely, I think, in the last couple of weeks. I don't disagree with that as a practice. Who knows what that gentleman in particular is doing with it. So, but if you have this population of people that their expectations have not been managed about what trying to get a job looks like, you're always going to have a certain amount of dissatisfaction there,
Oh, especially for when you're under pressure to get a job.
right?
That's the key element in there that, I have talked to job seekers where they applied for thousands of jobs.
Right.
They felt they were qualified for, they had the background, they had the experience, they had the college
Hmm.
experience, and they didn't get called, and they had no feedback, no
Yeah.
feedback whatsoever. So when there's no feedback, you don't know how to shift gears. How do I improvise? How do I change things up so I get seen?
Yeah. Well, and is it reasonable to expect feedback? I think it's one of the questions we should ask. And frankly, if we weren't such a litigious society, there'd probably be more free flow of that sort of information. But employers are so scared about that process that they've kind of locked it down. Like it's dead to them. They pay no attention to that because there is fear associated. There's risk associated with telling someone you didn't present well in the interview. We've decided to go with someone else, even though that's kind of what we say we want.
Right, exactly.
And we've overloaded the system. So humans aren't able to do. Once hired for entry level positions. And this is, gosh, we're probably looking at 15 years ago. We had an applicant tracking system, but there was no AI filtering in it. For entry level jobs, I would sometimes get upwards of 350 applicants. At the time, I was a generalist, so I did everything. Recruiting was not my full time responsibility, but I had to sort through those. And the hiring manager in those cases, they had not been really trained or prepared or had the expectation set for them about what their role is. Because that's the other side of the equation. Do we in organizations really understand what the relationship is between a hiring manager and the recruiting team? Who owns what? Who does what by when? I have strong opinions about this, having been on multiple sides of that equation, training people to do it, being a recruiter, being a hiring manager. I have thoughts. And one of those strong opinions is that we have allowed managers to cede responsibility for the hiring process to recruiting teams. This is the open position on my team. I have made the determination that it needs to be filled. I've gone through the approval processes, whatever it looks like with the particular company. And now, because of the volume, the specialty, the legalities, you are working with someone in talent acquisition to serve as your agent. They extend your capability, but they are not solely responsible. They own helping you with the result. They don't necessarily own the result because ultimately hiring manager, it's to you, right? Just period is your accountability to hire and retain talent. You have people that partner with you in the organization, including HR, finance, payroll, all the pieces that go together. And it looks different in every company, but if you aren't conversant in that, you're the problem. And if you have not been prepared, if your organization, your chain of command has not set that expectation, then yeah, we are looking at a cultural problem because there's a lack of understanding of what leading people and the operational aspects of leading people, what it really entails. So the leader, the hiring manager, should always be the one driving that work and setting the tone for it, as opposed to just handing it off to talent acquisition and waiting. And if they're the partner, if the manager is the partner that's driving that process, I think some of that helps to reduce the impersonal experience that people are having. Because in that event, there is a person who is deeply invested in making the right choice, driving the process. And I don't mean this as a dig on anyone in talent acquisition, sourcers, recruiters, onboarding specialists. Their investment is in getting through the volume. That's what matters to them. It has to in this day and age because there's a glut of applicants in the market.
That leads us to my next question. Hiring teams are under so much pressure, processing a lot of applicants, and they're leaning on technology. From your perspective, how do leaders balance efficiency with simply treating candidates like human beings?
Well, you've got to start by thinking, I'm dealing with human beings. You can go back and forth on the whole concept of human resources and the language that we use there. But that's the first thing is, are we designing systems for people or are we designing systems for units, if you will? So from that point of when you're implementing a new applicant tracking system, when you're bringing in an AI tool to support, are you thinking about it in terms of the human users and what it could be like for the person that applies? And as soon as they hit submit, they immediately get a rejection because we hear horror stories about that.
Yeah.
And is the system designed to show that, yes, we're using a tool that relies on this technology, but it's been implemented by people who care about other people?
It used to be that when you'd apply for a job, if you had transferable skills, you'd get looked at. Now that's not a part of the equation.
I think it is still, but it's been buried a little bit under all the mess, the dreck, right? The slop. I know AI slop has become one of those catchphrases. I think there are still plenty of human leaders out there and human recruiters who recognize the validity and the value of transferable skills, but they've gotten locked in to what the tool sort of defines for them.
The keywords?
Yeah. Yeah. This is the whole AI conversation, how we rushed toward implementing without actually discerning where the real need is. AI is sexy and shiny and exciting still. I mean, the shine is starting to wear off a little bit, but there's not. I don't see this level of discernment in how a lot of the application of the tools has come out. Again, keywords is a great example. Yes, you need keywords. That is how the model is going to work, that it's going to be searching for. It's kind of the same thing that you do when you're recruiting. You are looking for keywords. This just happening at a volume and speed that a human being can't manage. The issue is we're not constantly revisiting and providing feedback to the machine about what it's done or not done for us. So I use ChatGPT in a lot of my stuff that I do. My podcast, I don't like writing my episode descriptions. It's like death by baby turtles for me. Just I don't know why. I'd love to write the script, but the description, I'm done with it by that point. So I use
I think a
ChatGPT,
lot of us do. Yeah.
right? And when I find it necessary to make changes, because I don't just accept it, I don't just follow it whole, I feed back to it. This is what I've done differently.
And
Here's
you're
how I've
trained.
altered it. Exactly. And I don't know that the users in the space of talent acquisition understand that that's part of the process. Again, I take it all back to expectation setting, whether it's setting expectations for the applicant pool of what things look like, whether it's expectation of leader, this is your responsibility, or expectation setting around how are we using all the tools that are available to us and not allowing it to replace you, human, in the process.
Right.
A couple of months ago, some executive at Microsoft made a statement about how a certain percentage of jobs were going to be replaced by AI in whatever the length of time was. And my husband was sharing this report with me. I said, there is a difference between tasks and jobs. There are white collar tasks that AI can and should take. Frankly, things like going through 1,000 resumes. That is a perfect automated task, but it's one task in a larger job. So what is the job of the human that has deployed the AI for it? And it's not just taking it at face value. It's how are we engaging with it? And I think until we change the expectation of how people are engaging with the tools and making use of them, we're going to continue down this ghosted path, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's you don't when you apply, you don't know what they're looking for, even though you have the job description. It's almost like winning the lottery.
Yeah, it can be.
Empathy gets talked a lot about in leadership conversations, but in hiring, what does empathy actually look like in practice?
So empathy is trying to knock over my trash pail. Empathy has a couple of facets to it that are important in this conversation. There is the neurological reaction that happens in most brains. There are neurons in our brains called mirror neurons that when we witness certain things, we see the same brain activity as when the observer does the thing. This was discovered in Italy in the 90s. Researchers saw in macaque monkeys that they would record the brain activity when the monkey put a peanut in its mouth. The exact same activity would occur when a researcher would put a peanut in his or her mouth. So we see things and we have a chemical event in our brains. So we are able to feel what other people feel. The research expanded from those like locomotor elements to looking at emotionally. That's why we cry when we see people cry. I suspect it's why we yawn when we see people yawn. So there's this affective when we observe, we see it. Then we also have the ability to imagine what could something be like for someone else. That walk in a mile in someone's shoes, that intentional action of let me consider what you feel and try it on myself too. So affective and cognitive. And then compassionate empathy is what we do with it. And I think what we have in the talent acquisition space is an opportunity for more internal resources to do that walk a mile in the shoes, to go through the process as it's been established, not just to ideate. Here's what we're going to have, how we're going to have people apply. Here's what interviewing will look like. But to actually go through that experience, even in an abbreviated fashion, so that they can have this, I've seen it, I've done it moment. And then constantly asking themselves, what is this like for the people on the other side of the equation? Let me imagine what it feels like when someone applies and they don't hear anything for 6 months. Let me imagine what it's like and the opinions about our company that a candidate is going to have after doing an interview and not hearing from us for more than a year.
Right.
I think if we can do that active imagination, and again, it doesn't have to be like take 6 weeks and go through it. You can do abbreviated moments, either through imagination or through like a simulation or even a role play. You're getting perspective that then can be applied to the applicant candidate experience.
It's been interesting. I've talked to some individuals in talent acquisition and HR in the past few months, and I don't think they realized how bad it was out there. I couldn't fathom that, but how can you not realize it if you're not on LinkedIn or you're not on social media or you're not reading the internet? It's out there and it's in your face almost every single day. And I talked to someone this morning that's been looking for 15 months and just checking in to see how he's doing, how his mental state is, making sure he's okay. And it's that's the issue. There's that empathy right there. We need that in the hiring process. And
Wait,
get back to these people that are applying. Would give them some just an email letting them know you're still in the process. We're still looking at resumes, or we're still doing this. We'll get back with you in the next couple weeks, but just to let you know you're still in the process.
Yeah. I think even just saying you're sorry if there's a delay, right? So you said like recruiters don't know how bad it is out there. I think we don't always recognize how bad it is in there for those recruiters too. It is a high stress, high pressure job. We talked about this earlier when we first met and we're talking about this. So many recruiters they're early in their career. Those are entry level positions into organizations. So you have people that don't bring a lot of work experience by and large into that role. They may not receive great training. They may not have the connections that they need within the organization. Again, because hiring managers may think, well, it's with recruiting now, it's out of my hands. You have these inexperienced recruiters who are just trying to figure it out on their own. And we know that they are overwhelmed with the volume of applications that they're receiving. So it's bad on their side too. And I'm not saying that's an excuse for carelessness or cruelty, even, as seems to be the case in some instances. If we have two sides that are broken, we're all just kind of screwed.
We're both howling to the moon and not getting anywhere. And that's the really sad part. The one key, or the one element that's in both of this. Look, we all are using as job seekers AI to write your resume, to fit the keywords, to get through the ATS system. They're using ATS to filter through the resumes or the applications that are coming in. So, and I've said this many times through many shows, my ATS is going against my AI is going against your AI. Who's going to win?
None of us. None of us. I
So,
just read something recently, Mark, that one of the problems that is starting to crop up in the AI screening of applications is that AI has a bias toward AI.
yeah, I love it when
That,
I see that.
but like expert resume writers will review, prepare, and submit, and AI will still go with the AI generated. So we've gotten ourselves to this place where human bias has started to create artificial bias for us. I haven't followed it, but a couple of years ago, Workday was brought to court for
Ageism.
ageism. And that's happening because of the AI, not because of a human looking at it. And I think that's where we have to find, where do we inject the human touch into all of these processes, as opposed to just being a watchmaker, winding up and setting it to one side. And things like AI only relying on itself. We know that humans don't perform well when we're in an echo chamber. Why would we expect something we created to do so?
Right. So let me ask you one we come back to a lot in the show. When you look at the frustrations people are having with hiring today, do you think most of the problems are really technology problems, or are they leadership problems? So we've talked about AI, we've talked about the talent acquisition, HR, we've talked about the applicants. So here we
Yeah,
go.
it's leadership, right? Because leadership makes the decisions about the tech. But I think it's beyond the big decision makers, the kind of faceless senior leaders and organizations saying, give me AI. It's also a leadership problem for the individual. Am I managing myself? Again, I don't want to put the onus for the problem on the applicant side, but I do think that we need to do better on educating and informing people what it is going to look like to be in the space of being a job seeker, because it is hard. On the internal side, are leaders really owning the fact that I am responsible for the entire process of hiring someone, and that I am creating the employee experience before they've even been given an offer letter? So it is a leadership problem that is playing out in a technology space where unfortunately technology has kind of become a scapegoat for the leadership problem. The tools are amazing. The speed in which AI can do things for us is breathtaking, but just like we tend to cede responsibility in those hiring manager roles to recruiting, we've ceded responsibility to the tools for the work that we're ultimately responsible for.
Well, Kate, I really appreciate you being part of the conversation and bringing that leadership perspective into this. And we hope that they are listening. We hope that they understand that, we're not saying it's all their problem, but I wish they would look at this and having a better understanding of what is going on out there. And honestly, that's why we do the show, to connect what's happening inside organizations with what job seekers are actually experiencing on the outside. So if you're watching or listening and thinking, yep, that sounds like me, it sounds familiar, you're not alone. And if you'd like to share your story, feel free to email me or send me a DM. And if you wish to stay plugged into real stories and real people behind today's hiring system, give us a follow, subscribe. New episodes and shorts drop every week. And if your organization believes in hiring more human and wants to support conversations like this, we're opening up a few sponsorship spots. So feel free to reach out. I'm Mark Lane. This is Ghosted by the Machine, because behind every application, there's a human. Let's make hiring human again. Thanks again, Kate. We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Mark.